For Comedy Hype News, I'm Symphony Thompson. The world is still suffering after hearing about a white gunman identified as 21-year-old Ryan Christopher Palmetto, who killed 3 black people at a Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida on Saturday, in what is now classified as a racially motivated attack. According to CNN, Palmetto brought 2 firearms earlier this year that were used in the shooting. He also lived with his parents, had no criminal arrest history, although CNN reports that he was previously held under the Baker Act in 2017. Now, the network website describes the Baker Act as a law that allows people to involuntarily be detained and subject to an examination for up to 72 hours during a mental health crisis. Unfortunately, Jacksonville Sheriff T.K. Waters did not give any details on what led to Palmetto's Baker Act case, but did mention that normally a person who has been detained under the act is not eligible to purchase a firearm. If there is a Baker Act situation, they're prohibited from getting guns. We don't know if that Baker Act was recorded properly, whether it was considered a full Baker Act. However, it was later reported on Sunday that investigators found the guns to be legally purchased. Now, comedian D.L. Hughley, who is known for giving his opinions on these political issues, would reshare an article from Apple News. The article reported that before the shooting, Palmetto was turned away from Edward Waters University, a historically black university. He was asked to leave once he refused to identify himself. After the news became public, the school released a statement that said, the individual returned to their car and left campus without incident. The encounter was reported to the Jacksonville Sheriff Office by EWU Security. According to Sheriff Waters' detailed timeline, university police followed the gunman out of the school's parking lot and flagged down a sheriff's officer, saying that there was a suspicious person on campus. Shortly after, Palmetto made his way to Dollar General, where the tragedy took place. Unfortunately, this shooting came 5 years to the day of a mass shooting in downtown Jacksonville, which took place at a Madden video game tournament. The notes that were left behind by the shooter implied that he was aware of the event and may have chosen the date of the attack to coincide with the anniversary. Now, in addition to resharing an article, Hughley would repost a portion from the press conference where Sheriff Waters spoke. The clip confirms that this attack was racially motivated. Hughley's caption, "The hatred of a people, our people, my people, simply because the color of our skin is something that has not changed with time. When will it ever be safe to be black in America?" The comments were filled in agreement, with some even asking for a Stop Black Hate bill in reference to the Stop Asian Hate bill that was passed in 2021 after a mass shooting took the lives of 8 people, 6 of whom were Asian. Hughley would post a picture of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis speaking for the victims with a black woman hovering nearby wearing the shirt, "Stand with the Black Women." Hughley said, "A picture is worth 1,000 words. This one only needs 4. He would follow that up with a tweet that read, "It wasn't a Black history class that made an animal in Jacksonville, Florida. Grab a couple guns and kill innocent black people. It was white supremacy." As stated before, Hughley does not hold his tongue for anybody, as this comes just a few days after Hughley went in on former President Donald Trump's mugshot. 215 pounds. He's lying before the trial even starts. Hughley would then post a side-by-side of Trump's presidential portrait in his mugshot. Is this the first president to have a portrait in the White House and a mugshot at the post office? We now have a president with a mugshot. What a time to be alive. This makes Trump the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges. He has been indicted on all 4 of the election interference cases. These indictments come while he's leading the Republican field in the 2024 presidential nomination race. Trump, of course, has denied everything and was released after posting a total bond of $200,000. Joining me, I have our very own No Capital analyst, Marcus Board. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me in on this topic. How are you doing?
You know, hanging in there like the rest of us, but happy to be here to talk about it.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad to have you on this one because I know you're going to bring so much value to this. But first, I just want to start with your reaction after hearing of the shooting in Florida. What was your reaction to it?
It's another tragedy, and it matters, and there's value there because people's lives matter. But when we see situations like this happening over and over and over again, then we need to accept that it's not just a coincidence. It's not some type of circumstance that just so happens to happen. It's a policy. It's an expectation. And in order to change that expectation, we have to do more to get power so that we can stop these things from happening.
Yeah, so many layers here, and I'm going to go in a couple different directions. But first, I want to talk about the critics on situations like this. What do you say to people who bring up, hey, you get upset when there's instances like this, but what about black-on-black crime? What about the things that are happening in your own communities? How would you respond to people who say things like that?
To the people who say that, I would say that I would encourage them to do more research and to learn that most crime happens within racial groups. And the reason that happens is because of segregation. So most people commit crimes where they're at. Most people are segregated by race in America. But to the people who are responding to those folks, I'd say don't waste your time. They obviously don't know what they're talking about. And if they have any power, then you need to just take it from them as opposed to dealing with them and trying to argue with them, because it's a waste of everybody's time.
Absolutely, and a big distraction, because it's like the intentions are completely different, obviously. Like that, when we see cases like this, they're purposely seeking out a race or seeking out a group of people. Now, what I found interesting on this, Marcus, is so Ryan had no background, right? But in 2017, as mentioned earlier, he would be submitted under a Baker Act. He wouldn't be committed, but he would be submitted. Now, for that process, I do want to run that down because I found it quite funny. There are 4 steps in order for someone to be submitted under the Baker Act. It must be ordered by the court. This can be by a loved one or someone that they knows. Then there's a court hearing. Then it has to be ordered by a health professional. And then there's an examination. Now, as I mentioned, he was able to purchase these guns legally because this did not report on his background check. What do you think? Do you think the Baker Act should show up on your background regardless of if you're submitted or not? If you're committed or not. If you are submitted, do you think it should show up on your background check, especially when purchasing a firearm?
Yeah, we need more stringent checks on firearm purchases in this country. When people believe that Black Lives Matter, one thing that they're discouraged from believing is that we can actually make that a reality. If Black Lives Matter, we would stop people from being able to buy guns whenever they want to. People who try to say, well, it's our rights, it's our Second Amendment freedoms, all rights and freedoms, you ask any attorney, all rights and freedoms are limited. You cannot go into a movie theater and yell fire. You still have freedom of speech. In the same ways with our Second Amendment rights, we need to do more to curb people's access to weapons, whether they are firearms, handguns, or assault rifles. We still need to be able to check that. And until we can do that, we need to be able to protect ourselves and be smart about protecting ourselves, which means doing it collectively and strategically, not just on a one-on-one basis.
Man, Marcus, I tell you, I really love having you on these conversations. You bring so much knowledge. I appreciate you. Before I play this clip, I want to read something that D.L. Hughley posted and get your thoughts on it. So D.L. Hughley posted, he said, honest question, what did Black people ever do for somebody to wake up in the morning and be like, hey, I think I'm going to go to the mall and randomly murder some Black folks today. Nothing warrants this kind of hate. I just don't understand it. It's a tough question. I don't even know how to respond. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that question of, what makes someone wake up to say, hey, I'm going to attack this group of Black people? What are your thoughts?
We live in a country where people are taught every day that Black people are less than, that Black women are less than, both for being Black and for being women, that Black queer people are less than for being Black and being queer. And I know people in the comments hate when I say that, but the reality is every marginalized group, it gets worse when they're Black. And so the problem isn't the Black people, obviously. The problem is the things that we're learning about how to deal with one another in this society. I think the big thing here is that we can't pretend that violence is not the way of life for so many people in this country. We will never get rid of the fact that some people are going to use violence. But what we need to do is deal with those people in a way that is direct, that is effective, and that explains that we will not stand for that type of behavior. There's a lot of ways to do it. We have Stop the Violence groups in cities like Chicago that are de-escalating in community violence. So it's not like Black people aren't dealing with stuff within our own communities. But when we have a system of government that is invested in a system of domination like mass incarceration, we're going to continue to use punishment as a way to deal with people when they make mistakes or when they have problems. And that use of punishment will continue to lead to mass violence.
Absolutely. Now, Ron DeSantis would attend a press conference of sorts, and let's take a look. Here's what he had to say.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is here. We're going to ask the governor if he would come now and bring remarks.
Well, thank you for doing this. I want to just say to the councilwoman, I got you. Don't worry about it. We've already been looking to identify funds to be able to help make sure there's adequate security for Edward Waters College. We are not going to allow these institutions to be targeted by people.
Let me tell you, we finna put parties aside, because it ain't about parties today. If the governor wanted to come here and he bringing gifts to my community, y'all know I'm taking the gifts. We've been through enough already, and I don't want to go through no more. Y'all just be quiet just a minute and let the governor say what he gonna say, and we gonna get this party started.
We have already identified funds from the state of Florida. I've been in touch with Dr. Faison. We're going to be announcing some stuff tomorrow morning. You know, you had a major league scumbag come from Clay County up here. What he did is totally unacceptable in the state of Florida. We are not going to let people be targeted based on their race. In Florida, we've already given a lot of money to Jewish day schools because they've been targeted with anti-Semitism. You are not going to target HBCUs in the state of Florida and get away with it. We're going to hold you accountable. We're not going to let it happen. And we thank what everybody's done. TK, the mayor. Just know that the state of Florida stands with the community. Help is on the way. God bless you all.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things said in there. I found it funny how he kept calling her councilman, as if he didn't know her name. She would later identify herself as Ann. You know, when she said Jacoby is nice, but Ann is not. Also, too, it seemed like his energy switched up, because he first started out by saying he was looking to identify funds, and then after Ann came up and said what she said, he would then change it to, so we already identify funds. So. Yeah, it was very hypocritical, all the things he laid up. But I want to ask you directly, because I know you're over at Howard, which is an HBCU, and, you know, he talks about in this speech how HBCUs in Florida won't be targeted. However, we also see that he's taken out DEI programs and defunded those. Help me understand, Marcus, am I missing something, or is that not impacting and targeting HBCUs by defunding these DEI programs?
Of course it is. It's attacking Black people and anything that we care about. So if we care about our HBCUs, then that is what it's attacking. The reality is these politicians are invested in a strategic plan that's been going on for at least 50 years. We just had the 60-year anniversary of the March on Washington, where Dr. King was talking about police violence. We just had a Black woman in Ohio killed just the other day by police. All of these strategic targets are them actively going out and undoing the gains that we've made in civil rights, the gains that we've made in the movement for Black lives. Black people have been a part of it, elected officials, but also the white power structure. And so we just have to accept that this is what they're about so that we can move forward and fight them on it. But this little game that they play where they say, well, we're going to give you some money to show we care. Money is useful and necessary, but that's not a way that you show you care for a community. The way you show you care for a community is by investing in it, by getting to know the people in it, and by actually contributing a part of your life and connecting with people. You don't show you care by throwing a couple dollars at something. We'll take the money, but we'd rather have community building and efforts like the ones that they use to build all these white communities with all the land grants, with all the mortgage help, with all the education gains, with the GI Bill, with all of the gifts, the free gifts that they've given to white people in this country. If you really want to care about and support Black people, then you need to come up off it too.
Yeah, I think you pretty much answered my next question, but I'll still ask just in case you want to add anything. I think one of the big things that I think is important is, as you know, is education, educating our people and them knowing, like, hey, what to look for. Obviously, we're not going to see anything from Ron DeSantis, but someone that would be in his position, what are some things that we would want them? Like you said, security's not going to do anything, just throwing money. What are some things that we should look for to say, hey, okay, they're actually for us. They're actually looking to move us forward. What's going to help us?
So there's a few things in the state of Florida in particular and in the country in general that needs to happen. One is expanding voting rights. So we do not have access to the polls in Florida. They almost had some legislation that would allow convicted felons in particular in Florida to vote, which would be upwards of 3 million people. So getting access to the ballot is very important. Ending the system of mass incarceration. So 3 million people is a ridiculously high number. We need not have stuff like that affecting Black people in this country. We need to defund and abolish the police. I know abolition is a mile and a half away, but we need to de-escalate and get guns out of police officers' hands. They don't need to have the right to kill us just because they think we are breaking a law. They don't have that authority. They shouldn't have that authority. We need to end that too. We need to fund Black communities. So right now we're experiencing a situation where the United States is preparing to take away people's housing rights. So that's the reason why during COVID, when all the housing costs dropped, all these corporations were buying homes because their goal is to create a renter's market so that we don't have no money in our pockets. They want us in debt to do the indentured servitude that they've been doing ever since slavery ended, if it ever did.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much, Marcus, for chiming in on this. Now, I can't let you leave, but we saw D.L. Hughley react to Trump's mugshot, I guess to end on a lighter note, if you will. What were your thoughts after seeing the mugshot and seeing D.L. respond to it as well?
I think Trump, as I mentioned earlier, is running for president again, one, because he's probably going to be the Republican nominee, but two, because the PAC money that he has is funding his legal defense. He's allowed to do that as long as he is a candidate for office. So one of the things we have to understand is that every time we share it, every time we like it, every time we make a joke about it, every time we bring it up, even, we're adding to the exposure that he gets among his base. And we don't need to support that. We don't need to give that any type of energy or light or shine. He is trash. He means no good for Black people. And although he does on occasion make some very good points, he don't follow through on not one of them because he's a crook, he's a clown, and he's a goofy that we don't need to deal with.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Marcus. I know I said that was going to be the last one. Just last question. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, but so if Trump, coming out of my mouth is crazy to say. If Trump does get elected, does that save him from being arrested and from being like? Does that have any effect on the charges that he's been indicted for?
Yeah. So if he gets elected to the White House before he gets found guilty, then he may be able to pardon himself. It is in the U.S. Constitution that you cannot run for president or be elected president if you are a convicted felon. Now, as I've just said, I believe in abolition. Trump going to jail is a perfect example of the fact that if he go to jail, you think he's going to come out any different? Prisons don't change people. That's not for the better. It don't stop people from doing foolishness and acting up. So no, him getting elected would give him an opportunity to change the rule or pardon himself or figure out a way to get him out of that office. But the reality is, as we saw, getting somebody out of office is extremely difficult. This is an entire group of people who are committed to reinforcing the way that things are. And sometimes they Black, and sometimes they woman, and sometimes they queer, and sometimes they straight. They look just like you and me. But what they do when they get in those offices is make choices that hurt all of us. And I want us to really be sure about that when people are saying stuff like, well, Biden didn't do nothing, but Trump at least told it how it was. He could tell it however he wants to. He's not helping us. He's not doing anything that helps us get out of this tragedy that is the Black experience in this country. You got me fired up. I'm about to go to class. They've been about to be like, why are you yelling at me? I'm gonna be like, cuz I was on Comedy Hype. They were talking to me, you know, but it's a mess. And I think we need to figure out a way to build around our collective love for one another and our refusal to accept conditions as they are. That's how these things get fixed. We need these labor movements. We need the movement for Black lives. We need Black people. We need white people. We need a lot of people to come together and say enough is enough, and we need to change the way this thing is going. Otherwise, we're in for another 100 years.
Man, and we don't need that. Thank you so much, Marcus, for joining me in on this conversation. I know you're about to go to class, but if there's anything that you have coming up, please share. And of course, how can people keep up with all the amazing things that you're doing?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Sorry, I ain't laughed very much today.
No, you smile. Look, you're giving what our people need, knowledge. So I appreciate that.
I've been reflecting on my time with Comedy Hype. You know what I mean? I just think about, I've been in them YouTube comments. But like I said, I'm at Prof MBJ. You find me on most social media sites. My book, Invisible Weapons, is out. Won another award. Very excited to go get that this weekend. Really just stay engaged and stay involved. I think I did 2 radio shows this weekend talking about the 60-year anniversary of the March on Washington. And of course, the I Have a Dream speech. If you have a chance, go back and read that. It's very short. It's about 2 pages, or even just listen to it. But I think the stuff that King was talking about, we're still talking about today. That doesn't mean we haven't been doing work, right? The Dream Defenders are in Florida. Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida, and they created these groups and organizations to keep fighting. We are fighting, and we are winning. And even though we don't win the big stage, we don't blame oppressed people for being oppressed. So we fight, and it's worth the fight, and we need to keep fighting together and forever until it ends.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much, Marcus, for joining me and on this topic. I love being able to have you on, and I hope you have a wonderful class. Don't
Yeah,
get
I'm
too
like leaning into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marcus.
Of course. Thank you.
I mean, honestly, I don't even know what to say or where to start because it's so redundant. Situations like these are so redundant, and it infuriates me to constantly see my people targeted. I think D.L. Hughley said it perfect. Like, our people are targeted for the color of our skin, and that just baffles my mind. And all we get is an anti-Black, apathetic, hypocritical speech just to say that Governor Ron DeSantis is announcing some stuff tomorrow morning in an attempt to help these families. An attempt? Families are hurting, and you came all that way just to announce your attempt. Then had the audacity to brag about what you've done for other communities as if it's not pushing our face enough. But I digress. Man, it's tiring. So I'll end with this. My condolences, my love and prayers and resources goes out to the victims, families, and surrounding communities that were impacted by this tragedy. Oh, but before I close out, DeSantis, let's call him what he is. He's not a major league scumbag. The definition of a scumbag is a dishonest, unkind, or unpleasant person. I don't know about you, but for me, that's not what describes Ryan Christopher Palmetto. He's a racist, a murderer, a white supremacist, a terrorist. I mean, the list goes on. But one thing for sure, because y'all know I like to end in the words of somebody else. In the words of Ron DeSantis, scumbag has no place. But hey, those are just my thoughts. What are your thoughts on D.L. Hughley's responding to the shooting in Florida? For Comedy Hype News, I'm Symphony Thompson.